For me, the biggest impact now is actually sharing my story and trying to help other people that are either in this situation to help them think differently about the situation they're in.
You're listening to the Real Returns podcast, where we learn how real investments can make a real impact. Join your hosts, Andrew and Dan, as they share stories and interview business leaders on how real estate and other forms of investment can create meaningful change for individuals and communities around the world.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Real Returns podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Reichert. I'm joined with my co-host, Dan Croce. Dan, what's happening over there today?
Oh, Andrew, it's a gloomy Friday afternoon here in Pittsburgh, but I'm doing well. Usually this portion of the episode, I try and get you to laugh by telling you a joke, which you referred to typically as a bad joke. Right?
Usually doesn't work, yeah.
Well, today I'm going to tell you a story. And look, this is a true story. This actually happened to me, and this happened to me yesterday. And I haven't told you this yet, so we'll see if I can get you to laugh. This is a vulnerable one, guys. I'm going to be super vulnerable. But yesterday, I have 5 children. And so at my wife's encouragement, I went in for a vasectomy consultation. Okay?
I feel like there's a joke in here somewhere.
No jokes. You'll see. Well, it's a very short story. Basically, I'm here in this consultation. The physician, who I've never met, I'm in a place I've never been before, interacting with a person I've never met before, he starts describing to me the procedure. He wants me to understand the anatomy of what's going to happen. And I started to giggle because he was saying funny words that an 8-year-old boy would laugh at.
Yeah.
And then, sometimes you start laughing and you can't stop because you're just in that mode where you're giggly. So I literally had to apologize to this physician. I was laughing because he was saying the silly words that an 8-year-old would laugh at. So there's my story.
Wait till you're under the knife. He's gonna have his.
Not gonna be so funny.
He's gonna have his day. That's hilarious.
Oh, man, rough week for me, but here we are. Anyway, I am excited about our guest today, Gavin Gallagher. Gavin is an experienced real estate veteran and entrepreneur. He's a mentor. He's made a career about transforming challenges into opportunities. Kevin has a commercial real estate portfolio that he manages. He has his own online coaching business, and he's known for revitalizing a 40-acre landfill into an award-winning business campus. So really excited to hear about Kevin's experience today. Gavin's experience. Gavin, can you go ahead and introduce yourself to our audience?
Thanks, Daniel. Yeah, you hit it in one there. I run a business park in Dublin, Ireland called East Point, and it's been going now for about 2 decades. And in that time, we've had some interesting experiences and some ups and downs through the various recessions and crashes and things like that we've experienced.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So how did you even get into this, Gavin? Like, what got you into real estate? Tell us a little bit more of your story.
If I want to talk about real estate, I always go back to being a 15-year-old kid, and we were living in Ireland. We have it's a very small country. Like the population of Ireland when I was a kid was about 3.5 million people. So it's a very small country, and it wasn't very developed. And we went on a holiday with the family, with my mom and dad, and we went to New York City. And it was part of a kind of a tour that we'd stop in New York, then we go to Disney World in Florida. And I landed in New York City as a 15-year-old kid with my parents, and I was just absolutely blown away by the skyscrapers. And I'd never experienced anything like looking up and, it just goes forever. And this had such an impression on me that when I came back from that holiday, I became obsessed with drawing all of the sort of iconic skyscrapers of New York City. So the Empire State Building, the Chrysler, the Twin Towers at the time, all that stuff. And I used to draw these scale drawings. And after a couple of months of doing these repetitively, my relatives and my parents be saying, like, Gavin, you're going to be an architect. There's no question, like, this is what you're passionate about. And that planted the seed. So I went, and even though I was not an academic in school or college at all, I put the head down. I really started studying hard, and I got into architecture, and I qualified as an architect. And ironically, coming out the other side of architecture, I did a small little development project. And at the time, I was working for a couple that had asked me to do a housing project, like a small domestic extension to their home as the architect. And while I was doing this, I had found a small plot of land and I had gotten permits to go and build 4 houses on this plot of land. And the domestic extension that I was doing, my total fee for that was £8,000. Whereas this site that I got planning for 4 houses, I bought the site for 25,000, and within about 6 months, I was able to sell it for 125,000. So I can remember just this moment, this epiphany, when I just went, what am I doing architecture for? I just made 100 grand in 6 months. Whereas the previous 6 months I had spent on architectural drawings and all this for 8,000. And it just became so clear to me where the money is. And that's really, from then on, I just focused on real estate investment, development, things like that.
Wow, that's an amazing story. And so, you go from sketching the Chrysler building as a child to developing a 40-acre former landfill, which I'm sure you did not sketch a picture of as you were a child. Like, tell us about that. So one of the things we love to talk about is impact and like the impact of our investments. So tell us about that project and how did you get into it, and how do you think of impact as it relates to that?
Well, the project, I've got to sort of go back a little bit because I was a young man when this project began. It was actually my family, my father was involved, but my father died at a young age. My father was only 45 when he died, and I was 21 years of age. And so I got involved in the site after it had already been purchased, and my dad had been sort of involved in all of that stuff. So I was very green. I had no experience whatsoever in what I was doing. And I relied on my family members that were in the business with working with my dad. And so I very much was learning on the job as a young 21-year-old. And like buying a landfill site, there's so much work to do because landfill naturally gives off noxious gases like methane and sulfur dioxide and all of these things. And so we spent a good few years actually just remediating the site. We had to put in a whole network of pipes to actually try to drain the soil of the methane and create kind of a ventilation system that will actually allow us to clean it out. And after that, then we started to build office buildings. And you wouldn't build one until you had a tenant pretty much kind of signed up. And we were basically finding a tenant, building the building, and then we'd start another building at the same time, fill that with a tenant, sell it to somebody else, and then you'd keep on rolling. And so we did that, and we did it with about 30 buildings. And so it was kind of build one. As you're in the middle of leasing that, you start another one. As you're in the middle of starting the next one, you're selling the first one, you're recycling the capital. It was a very, very intensive period of probably 7 or 8 years that the project took of just continuously recycling and building. And it was an excellent place to learn the business. And what was interesting about it is because I was so green, I decided to go off and do sort of the stuff that younger people would start with, like residential investment and things like that. And so I have a hand in both camps. Like I've got commercial development at a kind of large scale. And then on the other side, I was buying houses, flipping them. I was developing them. I did some incredibly, I call them lucky deals now, like unicorn type deals. And it was we had in Ireland, I was kind of blessed to start into this business right at this perfect moment. It was called the Celtic Tiger. And they call it the Celtic Tiger because we had joined the European Union, and part of that, we were getting lots of the benefits of being part of this larger market. And Ireland just went through this incredible growth spurt where we had our real estate sector went through 25% annual growth. And I was just riding that wave. And so one of the, I suppose, the good things and one of the bad things about that is, of course, it's great to ride this like wave. But if you start your career in a moment where it's like that and you're experiencing exponential growth, then after not too long, you start to believe that you're invincible, that you're the smartest guy, that you created all this wealth, like that wasn't anything to do with the market rising.
Right.
And that kind of gets inside your head and the ego starts to tell you can do stuff, you can do anything. And I fell into that trap. And then I went after my largest ever project in 2006. And it was just about ready to finance just going into 2008. And so I was very rough timing. I had to raise 42 million and I put it into a commercial real estate deal in the south of Spain. So I was not even in a jurisdiction I was familiar with. It was the largest deal I'd ever done. And right when everything was about to kind of pop off and success, another success to add to my kind of like stable of successes, suddenly all hell broke loose. Lehman Brothers, everything just fell apart. And so I went through a really, really challenging 6 years of just all of my investments falling, getting chased by banks. And I experienced negative equity for a period of about 4 years during that journey. And it was brutal, really tough. So I've gone through the hero to the zero, and then it's taken me quite a few years to kind of build myself back up after that.
Yeah. Oh, that's such an interesting story. And I'd love to just dig in a little bit there. So, you talk about the adversity and the challenges, and then you're kind of finding a way to turn that into this opportunity to rebuild. What did it feel like needing to start over, needing to rebuild? How do you keep a positive mindset and build even after all of that adversity?
Well, it's not easy, the first thing. And it's kind of like, it's easy for me to say now on the other side of it, but I'm very conscious of the fact that there are people out there possibly listening now that are going through something similar. Maybe they've made a mistake and they've bought the wrong thing or whatever. And the advice that I would give is that, first of all, to put everything into perspective, during the worst of this, I wasn't alone. Like, I was experiencing negative equity, but so were thousands and thousands of people across the world, and millions probably. But I had friends who actually committed suicide as a result of the stress and strain of it and things like that. So when I look at my situation, I kind of just say, you know what? It was tough. It's tough on my family. I ended up divorced as a result of it. I lost the family home as a result of it. There was a lot of tough moments, but nobody died. And so from that perspective, and I look back on history, and you don't have to look too far nowadays if you look at, what's going on in different parts of the world with war and stuff. Like, we suffered a financial speed bump. That's all. That's the way to look at it. It's not, it's not fatal. Maybe it's, from a financial point of view, it's a humbling moment. And it certainly kind of makes you think twice about piling into a deal the next time. But first things, put things into perspective. Second thing I would say is take ownership for your responsibility in getting into trouble. And I would say that's number one, because when I first was experiencing the difficulty for the first few months, I was blaming everybody but myself. It was like Lehman Brothers, the greed of the bankers. It was this, it was that, it was everything but myself to blame. But like, I had a highly leveraged portfolio, and I had a lot of, we say the old metaphor, spinning plates. I had so many projects in different stages of development and stuff. Like, it was just impossible to make them all successful. And so who put me there? Did anyone force me to sign the loan documents, the loan agreements? No, it was myself. So it was only when I took a long, hard look at myself in the mirror and I just said, you know what? You did this. Nobody else. There's no bank that forced you to do any of this stuff. And it was that moment, it was kind of a turning point when I said, okay, it's me, it's on me, I did this. So I'm the only person who's going to get me out of this. And so that was kind of a turning point, certainly mentally. And it took a couple of years after that, but at least what I did then was I sort of asked myself, okay, financially, I'm on my knees, but is that the only resource that I have? Is money the only resource? No, we have knowledge, we have expertise that can go to use. You can work for other people. You can use other people's money to start again. My network of people, the people that I know, the people that I can contact, nobody took that away from me. So we all have resources, but a lot of people just go straight to the financial one and they say, oh, I'm down and out. That's it. I'm out of the game. And so once I realized that, hold on a sec, I've got energy, I've got passion, I've got tenacity, I've got this contacts, all these people in my network, and I've got a huge amount of experience from all of the projects that I've done up to this point. I think I can do something important and impactful again. And the impactful thing, like you asked the question about, real estate and impact and stuff. For me, the biggest impact now is actually sharing my story and trying to help other people that are either in this situation to help them think differently about the situation they're in, or for younger people who are starting out, is just to kind of give them pause and just sort of say, guys, it's not going to keep on going up and up and up. You have to be ready, and you have to kind of monitor your emotions and make sure you don't lose control, don't lose rationality. It's naive to think that every deal you touch will turn to gold. It's pure naivety. You have to understand that a deal can and will go wrong. And it may be nothing that you've done wrong, maybe the timing in the market or whatever. So just don't paint yourself into a corner where you're going all in on one deal and then suddenly that's the one that takes you down.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think that to recover from something like that, I feel like you really have to have a good sense of your why, sort of
Big time.
a deeply rooted North Star, right? And you mentioned, other folks dealing with suicide. I mean, that is just heartbreaking. And I can imagine it's something like that adversity, that challenge that can really disrupt the status quo and help you ask that question, the why question. So if you don't mind,
time.
I'd love to hear maybe a little bit from you. Is what's your North Star? What's your why? What's the fire in the belly that makes you want to do what you do?
Well, there's a couple of things. The first thing is Daniel said he has 5 kids. I'm the same. I have 5 kids, but I won't be going near any doctor. I can tell you that in that regard. But the situation in terms of my North Star, I'm always thinking about my kids, and I want to be a great role model for them. And so all the time that I was going through this hardship, at the time I had 3 daughters. Now I have 4 daughters and a son. But I was going through this hardship, and I can remember just thinking, it doesn't matter what I'm experiencing. I don't want them to feel like dad's in a gloom, dad's in a really bad place. I want to come home with a level composure. And so that was part of it, just making sure. And so how do I optimize my day? I do a lot of exercise. I make sure first thing in the morning, get a good run in so that you get the endorphins. And so just made it easier to deal with the stress and strain of it all so that I can show up, hopefully, the best possible person. And then the other side to it, but that really the North Star for me in many respects is, I mentioned the suicide. So there was quite a number of suicides, but 2 in particular were quite close to home, relatives of mine, close relatives. And in the case of one, I was actually the first person that was contacted by the police. And they asked me to come out and to identify the body and all this kind of stuff. And I can remember kind of going, oh my God, like, what happened, And when they told me it was suicide, I was just like shocked, because I had spent the weekend with this person, no inkling that this was on their mind or that there was depression or anything at all. It was the most shocking thing. But then the next thing was, okay, Gavin, come with us now. I was like, the police were taking me where do you want to take me? And he said, we're going to go to his family's house now. You have to tell his wife and kids that their father is. And I was just like, are you kidding? You want me to do that? I said, yeah, of course. It should be a family member. And I was just like, oh my God, like this is. So I saw the first 5 seconds of a widow finding out about what's just happened to her husband, the kids. Like I saw all of that as close as this. And the impact of that just made, like, that was part of the fire in my belly when I was going through the difficult times, was that no matter what happens to me, I am not going to look at that as any kind of a solution. And so I just thought to myself, there was a moment when it was really, really difficult and really dark, and I was losing the family home. And like we had a beautiful big mansion, and it was a beautiful home, like very, very proud of our home that we had built, and the bank were taking it on us. And that's a very humbling moment. And that was pretty much what was responsible for the divorce that I went through afterwards. But I remember kind of thinking to myself, I can understand in this moment the emotion that people would go through when they would actually make that decision that, you know what, I don't want to be here anymore. I don't want to feel this anymore. And I can remember that moment thinking to myself, this is a kind of defining moment in my life. I want to make sure that I come out of this stronger, wiser, and I'm going to help other people that are going through difficult times, to show them not only can you get through these difficult times, but you can actually excel on the other side of them.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you so much for sharing. I know it requires a lot of vulnerability and humility to share a situation like that. So thank you for sharing. And I do just believe that you, having gone through that experience, uniquely positions you to share hope and to share your purpose and your why, and to continue to impact the next generation that are following in your footsteps. So With that, I'm going to hand it over to Dan to lead you through the lightning round. And we'll let Dan kick that off.
Thank you, Andrew. And before I do that, Gavin, I just have to say that this is very impactful, even for me. What an impactful story. And I feel a great sense of privilege to be able to be on the line with you here and kind of hear from you and learn from you. And I appreciate your perspective and the humility with which you've kind of articulated your story. So thank you. Hey, so lightning round, fun part. A few questions for us to get to know you on a personal level. So what would you say is your biggest win in life? And that can be personal or professional.
Well, we've talked about property deals and all that kind of stuff. And I'm actually going to say my biggest win, I guess, is finding my wife, the lady that I'm very, very grateful and proud to be married to today. And it was not easy, I can tell you, because I was living in the Middle East. And after the crash of everything, I needed to go and find work. And so I went to the Middle East and I started working in places like Dubai and Doha and these places. And while I was there, I got introduced to my wife now, but she was living several hours away in an airplane. And I was introduced to her through an email and a Skype chat, believe it or not, which is now gone as I was reflecting on the other day. But I started getting to know her through Skype. And after a couple of weeks, I was like, I really like this girl. I want to kind of meet her, but she lives like 2 flights away from where I was. And I was like, what is the likelihood of me finding the one living 2 flights away? I had to fly for 5 hours to get to the location where she was living. And I was just like, am I crazy, jumping on this flight and doing this? Like, I'm liking somebody on a Skype chat and like traveling for 5 hours on 2 aircraft to get there. So I decided, okay, I'm going to do it. I need to know. And we met on the 18th of May, 2012. And we were married on the 18th of May, 2022, exactly 10 years to the day that we met. And we've been together ever since. So I'm very, very grateful for that. That's my big win, I would say.
Yeah, that's a huge win. Congratulations. It's a neat story. Gavin, what would you say is your favorite movie?
Oh, that is clear winner. The Shawshank Redemption. I absolutely love that movie. I think, well, you know what? I really, I saw that in the cinema when it came out first many years ago. I think it was maybe I can't remember, is it 92 or something like that? It's a long time ago. And everyone who's seen the movie knows the kind of the moment where you kind of go, huh, what? And it's this critical moment. But what I loved about it was just the story of resilience. Like, he's been in this prison for 20 years. He's endured the worst kind of conditions and all of this abuse and everything. And he had this grit and perseverance to kind of plan his escape. And I just absolutely love how that movie finishes with him on the beach and everything like that. It's a fabulous movie. Just love it.
Yeah, it stands to reason that your favorite movie would be one about redemption and grit. So how about your favorite food?
Well, I'm no foodie, okay? I'm going to clear that one up. But it's funny, the different places that I've lived, and I've traveled quite a bit. I lived in Spain for a couple of years in the south of Spain. And so I used to wake up in the Mediterranean every day, and I fell in love with Spanish paella. And it's such a delicious dish. I just love that food. And close second, I would say, is I lived in the Middle East. And while I was living in the Middle East, I used to love going to these Lebanese restaurants, and you get the fattoush salad and all this kind of stuff. And I fell in love with that as well. So I'm not really a foodie, but there is a few dishes that really catch my eye,
Yeah, that's making me hungry. I was in Spain and I also got to try there, and I get it. It was pretty awesome.
Yeah.
What's a current growth edge for you, a way that you're hoping to improve yourself personally or professionally?
Well, I'll tell you, this is a good question, because I scratching my head wondering, how should I answer this? The reality is, I have never done any kind of sales training, and I'm 52 years of age, and I've gotten through life just assuming that sales was like a conversation that you had with somebody. And I signed up for formal sales training with a guy called Joe Marcoux, and he runs a thing called the Sales Dojo. He's in America, in the US and in Canada. And my eyes have been opened. Like, I had no idea that the sales process, that there was such a kind of a process involved, and the psychology and stuff. And since I did that, I suddenly realized, like, there's role play and all this kind of stuff. Since I did it, I realized how impactful it is to have these powers of persuasion for my day job, like in the real estate business, if I'm speaking to investors, anything like that, what you're trying to do when you're speaking to somebody about investing in your project or something is to give them certainty that their money is in a safe pair of hands. And to do that, there's a process involved. And so learning those skills has been a real game changer for me.
Yeah, that's phenomenal. And I appreciate and respect the fact that at 52, you're a learner. You're trying to get better and improve. And I love when I
ABL,
see
always be learning.
That's right. Good
That's
stuff.
that's my motto.
And then the last one, what's some A+ content you're taking in these days, whether books or podcasts, or what's some good stuff that...
Well, I'll tell you, in terms of a podcast, one of my favorites, and it's growing very quickly on the internet, so I'm sure you've come across The Diary of a CEO. And it's a guy called Stephen Bartlett, and he's got some great guests. So I do enjoy watching that. But one of the biggest guests that he had on his show, and he's been back a few times, is actually a friend of mine and a guy that I know for about the last 6 years, a guy called Daniel Priestley. And Daniel wrote a book called The Key Person of Influence. And it's behind me, in my shelf here behind me. But The Key Person of Influence, it changed my life. And because it's a really interesting book on positioning yourself in the market as a key person of influence. And it's about how you can use social media, how you can publish either in the case of a podcast or a book or whatever, and you can position yourself as an expert. And I read that book in 2019. And soon after reading that book, I started a podcast. And soon after that, I started social media, and it's all kind of exponentially grown in the last couple of years. And I put it down to that one book. So thank you to Daniel Priestley.
That's awesome. And how can our audience keep up with you or connect with you after the fact here?
Thanks for asking, Dan. So I have a podcast myself. It's called Behind the Facade. And I talk about investment, real estate, and resilience. And, all of the good stuff like mindset and what's going on in the real estate market. In terms of website, I have my own personal website called Gavin J Gallagher, J for James. And so gavinjgallagher.com. You can find me there and reach out.
Awesome, Gavin. And I can attest to having been on your podcast and recognizing, having listened to it as well. It is a phenomenal resource. So definitely encourage our listeners to listen into your podcast. Gavin, thank you so much for being on the show. It's good to connect with you again, as always. And thank you to our listeners for listening in. We'll catch you all next time.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Real Returns Podcast. We hope that you learned something new about how you can invest to make a lasting impact on those around you. Please be sure to subscribe to our show wherever you listen to your podcasts, leave us a review, and share about us on social media. We hope you will join us for our next episode, where we will be continuing the conversation around impactful real estate investing.